Before today's episode, I just want to take a second to acknowledge the passing of a dear friend of mine, a fellow whiskey enthusiast, a colleague, a mentor, a Tram Association member, a friend, and a confidant, and just an all-round amazing guy. Last night, we lost Jay Wheelock, who passed unexpectedly in his sleep. And yeah, you'll be missed, Jay. You really will. This is something that Jay brought back for me from Japan. If you've seen it in a previous episode, I've always said Jay is one of the kindest, most beautiful men in existence. So, if you have a glass handy, please join me in a toast to Jay Wheelock. We miss you, bud. This one's for you. Slideshow.
Here's to whiskey kisses, the peachy taste of sin.
Greetings, whiskey folk. Welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, as always, Adam Bradshaw, and this is my kitchen in sunny Victoria, BC. And we're going to start something new with Drinking Out Loud. I've been listening to your comments and taking heed of your words of wisdom, and we are going to be on a schedule from now on. So Drinking Out Loud, brand new episodes will occur on Friday evenings at 7 o'clock and Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock. Now, not necessarily every Friday and Sunday evening, although I'm going to try and do as many as possible, but just so that you can keep track of it and know when to tune in for the live comments at the premiere. We're going Fridays at 7, Sundays at 7, starting with this one right here. And today, some interesting whiskies. First of all, as always, good idea to warm up, and I'm warming up today with a Cadenhead. Now, this is something you don't see very often here in BC because we don't have anywhere in BC that sells them. Where did I get this? Well, I got this on one of my trips to Alberta for Kensington Wine Market's Whiskey Festival a long time ago. Actually, not that long ago, I guess 2 years ago maybe. But this is a very special edition of Cadenheads because this was bottled for another whiskey club that I'm a member of. This is an independent whiskey club with chapters all across Canada, and that is the Companions of the Quake. So a very special hello and a very special cheers to anyone watching right now who is a fellow companion. The Companions of the Quake are a club that specialise in doing whiskey dinners. So we'll get together usually once or twice a month and have a full dinner with whiskies alongside, or usually before the dinner rather than with. It's not so much a whiskey dinner pairing thing, especially at our chapter. It's more about enjoying each other's company, having a meal together, and also showcasing some fantastic whiskies. So Slan Shavar to Frank, of course, who runs my chapter, and to Tom and Vi, who run the chapter over in Sydney, and to any members and any organisers from any of the chapters across the country. Cheers. Now, Cadenheads is another independent bottler, a particularly interesting one. I believe it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, independent bottler in Scotland. But they are based in Campbellton, and I believe they're part of the same company as Springbank. I've heard legends of going to the Cadenhead vaults and finding all of the interesting whiskies that got maturing there, sometimes maybe being able to get some samples from the cask room. Something that I was hoping to do in a couple of months. Obviously, that's going to be delayed now, but at least I can enjoy some Cadenheads right here, right now. This is from a distillery that we also don't see very often here in BC. So a bottler and a distillery that is quite rare here. This is from a distillery called Ord, or sometimes Glen Ord, and it's mostly seen under the Singleton brand. Now, the Singleton brand, you might be thinking, well, we have Singleton here. Yeah, but there's actually 3 different distilleries that make up the Singleton brand, and depending on where you are in the world, there's different distilleries that you will see. So here in BC, for some reason, we get the Singleton of Duffton. I think the Duffton is usually the European one, but from what I remember, the Glen Ord is the Singleton that is usually available in Europe, and the one that's normally available in North America here is the Singleton of something. It's the Singleton of something. and I can't remember what that something is. It's a Dal something, maybe? It's another one of these distilleries that you don't really see very often other than in the Singleton brand. If you can think of it, let me know in the comments, because my mind is drawing a blank right now. But yeah, there's three. We generally see the Dufton here. Glendoolan, maybe? I should have done my homework. Anyway, this is the opening dram. I'm not supposed to talk about this as much as I already have, but yeah, Slanchevar. Beautiful cask strength, teenage. I think it's teenage. Yeah, 13, just teenage. 55.1% ABV. Just a really nice, big, honeyed whiskey, this one. It really caught my attention when I sampled it because it reminded me of Kleinleach in that way. It's got that sort of honeycomb waxiness. It's a little sweeter, I think, than Kleinleach. It's got sort of almost like a sweet porridge oatmeal thing going on with it, with a lot of lemon rind. Big fan of this one. So if you are a Companions of the Quake member and you have a bottle of this on your shelf from a couple of years ago still, why not pour yourself a glass right now and enjoy it as we chat in the live chat during this video. Slanchevar. All right. So on to today's actual whiskey. So today we're doing something... That's good. We're doing something that is inspired by one of my favourite YouTube shows that is completely nothing to do with whiskey. There's a show called Worth It, which, if you're a fan of food and you don't mind some slightly, I don't know, not annoying, but slightly more jovial, odd presentation style, definitely check out Worth It. It is a hilarious season of shows, or series of shows, sorry, where the concept is there's a different theme every episode, and the presenters are tasked with trying 3 different versions of that food item from 3 different places at 3 drastically different price points. So, for example, they'll have a $2 burger, a $15 burger, and a $500 burger. Something ridiculous like that. And then between them, they will decide which one was the most worth it for the price point. Because, yeah, I mean, you can generally expect a $500 burger to be better than a $15 burger, but is it worth the $500? And the same kind of concept can be passed on to whiskey as well. So today I'm doing 3 different whiskies at 3 not so drastically different price points, but 3 different price points nonetheless. One in the sub $100 range, one in the $100 to $200 range, and one in the $200 to $300 range here in Victoria, BC. So we're going to start off with the $100 range, and this is a whiskey that I hadn't tried before. Sometime last year we did it in a masterclass, and I hadn't actually tried this bottle before I presented it in a masterclass. I kind of chose it for the masterclass as an excuse to crack open the bottle and give it a try, and I was very, very impressed. For the price point, I think this is an absolutely stunning whiskey. So I'm going to get rid of this glass, give myself a fresh one, and I present to you whiskey number 1 today, Tamdhu 10. Tamdhu 10. So this is in the sub $100 price range. So interesting notes about Tamdhu. It was actually closed down relatively recently. It was previously owned by Edrington, and it was mothballed in 2009. They decided to sort of change their approach to whiskey. Edrington had, used to have quite a few different distilleries, and now they really wanted to narrow it down to just Macallan and Highland Park. And at that point, they still had Glenturret, which they've now shed as well. I believe they still, to this day, have Glenrothes. They're probably trying to sell it because they really are concentrating just on Macallan and Highland Park. And, for better or worse, Macallan and Highland Park are very, very popular distilleries. The prices of the bottles keep going up. The quality is debatable. A lot of people will debate the quality of the modern Macallans and Highland Parks, but there's no doubt about it. When you get a good one, it is still very, very good. It was bought out, Tamdhu was bought out in 2011 by Ian MacLeod, which is a company with a great whiskey background, and they actually started distilling again in 2012. So it's only been distilling again for 8 years. So that means that this Tamdhu 10-year-old is absolutely, definitely distilled whilst it was still under control of Edrington, which is kind of interesting. So we're not necessarily getting to see Ian McLeod's full fingerprint on this one, but we are getting to see the results of their maturation, so for the most part, but also especially their blending techniques and what they're bringing to the table in terms of presentation. Yeah, I'm going to pour myself a dram of this before I talk anymore, because talking about whiskey is oh so much better when you're able to smell and taste it. Look at the colour of that. That is just beautiful. I don't know if it doesn't say anywhere. It doesn't say anywhere that it doesn't have colouring, but it also doesn't say anywhere, like mit Farbstoff, the German, that says it does have colouring. I haven't bothered to look it up because honestly, I kind of just wish and hope that it isn't coloured, because it's such a beautiful, rich hue. And one thing that would lead me to believe that it probably isn't is it is 100% sherry cask matured, which for a 10-year-old sherry cask whiskey, this is the kind of colour I would expect. So it probably is natural colour. Anyway, a little bit more about the history of Tamdhu. It was founded in 1897 by just a mad group of people. Like, essentially, if you think of like the quintessential whiskey celebrities of the late 19th century in Scotland, this is basically the Avengers of those. Like, all of them coming together to create this crazy thing. This distillery is like Endgame, I guess. I've not actually seen Endgame, but from what I understand, all of the characters come together. They're probably doing all of the Avengers movies. I'm sorry, I haven't actually seen them. But yeah, probably shouldn't be drawing an analogy with something that I don't have much knowledge about. Probably everyone in the comment section right now is screaming at me because I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I'm going to continue with it. But yeah, the people that started this distillery, you've probably heard of some of them. William Grant, pretty well known. You know, Grants. John Dewars. Yeah, same guy. And John Walker as well, the Johnny Walker. All three of those, plus several other investors, came together to build this distillery. And one thing I do know about the Marvel Universe is that the person that brings them together is Nick Fury. And I don't know if historically this is the perfect analogy, because I don't think he brought them together, but he certainly made Tamdhu possible and made the distillery as good as it could be. The other person that came involved was Charles Doig, who is unquestionably the best and most prolific distillery engineer of his time, and he was the creator of the pagoda roof. Like, not creator of the pagoda roof, obviously pagodas were a thing beforehand, but the idea of using a pagoda roof at a distillery for the release of the heat and the temperatures. Charles Doig is probably the greatest distillery architect known to man. Apart from maybe the guy that came up with the Macallan distillery. That is the new one. That is quite something. I'm not sure if it's good, but it's something. The Teletubbies. Anyway. So this exact edition, this 10-year-old, was released in 2013. As I said before, 100% sherry cask on this one. And yeah, it is sherried. It is beautifully, wonderfully sherried. It is, if you've ever, there's a lot of whiskies that you can get, especially from the Speyside, which I should probably mention, Tamdhu is a Speyside region whiskey, that have this 100% sherry maturation. The first one that comes to mind, of course, is always Glenfarclas, absolute classic. If you're a fan of Glenfarclas and you just want just a touch more sherry influence, this is exactly what you have here with Tamdhu. So that would be my advice. If you're a fan of the Glenfarclas 12 and you want just a hint more sherry without more ABV, without the burn, we're not talking Abelard or Abunard here. It's sherried, but it's not cask strength. It's 43, I think. Yeah, 43%. So, it's a standard edition 10-year-old, right? But it has just a beautiful, beautiful amount of sherry to it. Yeah. Big orange rind hit there. Lots of chocolate, dark chocolate, cloves. All of these sound like really deep, dark, wintry flavor notes, but it's not telling the whole story. It doesn't taste like a wintry dram. It tastes, I don't know. It's got those notes, but they're presented in a much more summery way. It's like taking all of those classic wintry flavors, but then putting them onto some kind of wonderful cake that's served at a picnic in the middle of summer with fresh apricots on the side. I mean, it's not. It wouldn't be doing it justice to say that this is just that big, deep, dark sherried whiskey, because it really isn't. It does have that lighter side to it as well. Nice bit of almonds there. It's not overly nutty, but it's definitely got that savoury nut aspect to it. Apricots, I think, is actually a good one. Definitely getting those honeyed apricots on this. Yeah, so I think it's pretty worth it. I'm definitely a fan of this one. I mean, all of the whiskies that I'm going to be presenting here today, I personally think are worth the price point. That's why I have them. But we'll talk about which one at the end I think is the most worth it for the price point. And this is a strong contender right off the bat. This is currently available at that sub $100 price point. It's normally $106, but you can get it right now at strathliquor.com for $93.83 for an official bottling 10-year-old Tamdhu 100% sherry cask whiskey. And I think it's glorious. I also like the presentation, I have to say. There's a lot to be said about how whiskey presents itself, not just physically, but in terms of its story and its history as well. And that's a big part of whiskey for me. I mean, if you just looked at the taste, I don't think that's doing the whiskey justice. I think it presents itself beautiful. I love the bottle. The tube that it comes in is really nice as well. It has this hilarious little pun on it. It's Tamdhu, the can-do malt. I don't know. Or can-do whiskey, one of the two. Jury's still out on that, but it's a really cool sort of throwback design, and it's a great just straight up after dinner dram. Like, when this is all over, if you get invited to a dinner party and you're expected to bring the after dinner drink, a whole bottle of this, plonk it down in the middle of the table, boom, beauty, you're done, everyone's happy. And yeah, at that price point, it's really a really good whiskey for that exact purpose. I think it'd be very hard for someone to dislike this whiskey. I know there's a lot of people who are very sensitive to sulfur in sherried whiskies. I don't get even a whiff of sulfur on this. I personally don't mind a touch of sulfur, but I do try and pay attention to it because I know there's a lot of people out there who, even just a hint of it, it's just ruins the entire whiskey. I don't get any on this. I think this is just a very approachable whiskey. There's zero sort of, I mean, it's 43%. There's zero burn. If you're used to having spirits at all, especially if, like myself, who you're generally used to drinking cask strength spirits, it's about as aggressive as apple juice, to be honest. But the flavor is rich and full. Yeah. I'm going to return to this in one of my side videos that I'm going to be releasing shortly. We're going to do 2 minutes with videos. So I'm going to have 2 minutes with Tamdhu where I give this one a bit of a personal score and talk about why I like this whiskey as well. So look out for this one coming up in a future video because I think this is worth talking about scoring. It's something I'm not going to do in these drinking out loud videos because the idea with the 2 minutes video is I actually spend about an hour with a whiskey and then just sum up my experience with that whiskey in 2 minutes. And I haven't spent enough time with this whiskey to really do that justice yet, but look forward to it coming up in a future video. Tamdhu 10. Beautiful whiskey. I'll just sneak that to the side and we'll move on to whiskey number 2 today. Now, unlike the Worth It videos, I'm not going to jump into the second most expensive now because whiskey just doesn't necessarily work like that. It just so happens that the one that I've chosen for the $100 to $200 range today is quite strong and quite peaty. So I'm going to jump way up to the $200 to $300 range and talk about something cool. This is a new glass, the Cappadonic 21. Cappadonic 21. So, I was very excited to get this whiskey. We first got this in the week of the Victoria Whiskey Festival. a time which I long for right now. I always do this at the festival. I get so caught up in the work, and it's so busy, and I was so many late nights. There's a certain somebody who has this ability to somehow persuade me to stay awake until 5 a.m. drinking whiskey with them. Actually, a couple of certain somebodies. But I always then, a month later, look back so longingly at the festival, just being so happy that something like that exists, where people with a passion for this industry, for this hobby, get together and just celebrate it like nobody's business. The Victoria Whisky Festival is an absolutely stunning event, and even though it almost kills me every year to work at the event, about a month later, I'm just cannot wait for the next one. And especially right now, being so far away and distant feeling from a lot of the whiskey community. I mean, even though I'm doing these videos and getting to chat with a lot of you online, and even though I get to see some of you when I'm doing my deliveries for the store, it's not the same as sitting in a big room and just relaxing and talking about the whiskies together. And I really do miss that, and it really makes me long for that festival experience. And God, I really hope that this is contained enough, and I hope that we manage to develop a vaccine for this in time for the Victoria Whisky Festival next year, because it would be a very, very sad thing for us to have to miss a festival. I'm not sure I could manage, to be honest. I would be shedding many, many tears. But regardless, this came out just in time, the day before the Whisky Festival started, and we debuted it at our pop-up store. It just so happens that the 6 bottles that we had sold out in 4 minutes flat. So if you're thinking, I was at that pop-up store, I didn't remember seeing a Capadonic 21, well, you probably didn't unless you were there in the first few minutes of the Thursday evening tastings. But the good news is we managed to get some back, and we managed to get quite a bit back. We're pretty well stocked with this right now on the online store, and this is a whiskey we presented in the Dram Association just before the outbreak occurred, so it's actually already online with the discount. I'm not going to be clicking a big red button to make it go. It's already there right now. So for those of you who are thinking, what the hell's a Capadonic? It's not a distillery I've heard of before. Well, it's probably a reason for that. It's closed. It closed down in 2002. It wasn't a particularly well-known distillery before that, to be honest. It was part of a blending ingredient for Chivas. Wasn't really ever showcased on its own so much. You'll have seen quite a few of them in independent bottlings, but as an official bottling single malt, I can't recall ever seeing one in person before. So this is a really neat thing to have. I should also mention that for those of you who are looking for something just a little bit higher than this, the 25-year-old is available too. Haven't tried it yet. I hear it's very good. So, Capadonic. It's a closed distillery. It's an interesting site though, because although the distillery is closed, it's still part of the whiskey industry. And a lot of closed distilleries end up being maltings or warehouses for the sister distilleries or sister companies. This one took a very different route. Although it's still very much part of the industry, this is now part of Forsyth's Coppersmiths. Forsyths, of course, being like the world leaders in making pot stills. In fact, I talked about it in a previous video. There's a very good chance, actually, that the exact site where this whiskey was distilled is also the exact site where the stills that now sit at Shelter Point were made. That's kind of cool. That's very cool, actually. So yeah, like I said, 2002 is when Capadonic closed its doors. They never plan to reopen it. It's gone. It's not just been mothballed. It's been sort of ripped out and demolished. It's now, as I said, a copper works. Unlike many closed distilleries before it, it wasn't really recognized until after it closed. So if you're thinking closed distilleries like Port Ellen maybe, or Brora, those distilleries weren't particularly well respected. I mean, they were respected, but they weren't well known and highly regarded as much when they were open as they are now that you can't get them anymore. And bottles of those whiskies go for thousands and thousands of dollars at auctions, and when they bring out the rare official bottlings every year as well as part of the Diageo's annual collections. This one then came as quite a surprise because the price point, like I said, is between $200 and $300 right now, which is pretty mad for a closed distillery official bottling 21-year-old. It's very mad. But like I said, didn't have a particularly good reputation or particularly well-known reputation. It wasn't ever thought of as bad. It's just that most people had never heard of it when it was open. So it had a pretty rocky start, actually. In 1898 is when it started. Not a great time to start a distillery, as historians will tell you. And it actually fell silent just 4 years after that. In 1902, it was closed down. And it didn't actually even have its own name back then. It's the Capadonic site, it became Capadonic, but back then it was simply known as Glen Grant 2. Glen Grant, of course, nowadays an incredibly popular whiskey. It's won the best Scotch in the world several times at several competitions, of course, Jim Murray being one of them. He's a big fan of the 18-year-old. But yeah, the Glen Grant 2 was the original name of Capadonic because it was basically an overflow production for the Glen Grant distillery. Although the stills weren't in use after it closed down, Glen Grant still used the space for malting. And in 1965, I believe it was, Glen Grant became hugely popular in Italy, which it still is to this day. I don't know if it has been for the last couple of years, but I remember a few years ago looking, and Glen Grant is the number one selling whiskey at the time in Italy. Single malt, that is, not blend. And that's mad for a whiskey that in most territories is relatively unknown unless you're sort of deep into the whiskey fandom. Yeah, but in Italy, they absolutely love Glen Grant. So the auxiliary distillery, Glen Grant 2, got kicked into life again. And in 1977, it got given its own name. Finally, it could come out from behind the shadow of its big brother and have its own identity. Didn't last too long, though. As we said, closed down in 2002. The good news is, because it was from a blending house and because it was kind of an auxiliary distillery still, it was still, it was its own place, but it was really just pumping up volume for the blends. They had a lot of whiskey still when it closed down, and luckily for us, they held on to a lot of it. And now, 18 years after it closed, we're still seeing whiskies coming from Capadonic. So this 21-year-old would have been distilled in the last few years before it closed down. Let's give it a try. So the big thing to note about this one is, again, the colour. Let me compare a little bit. Same kind of depth, slightly different hue. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. It's a little yellower than the Tamdu, and that's because this is first fill American oak, I believe. 100% first fill American oak, so very, very different cask type to the Tamdu. And you really do get that rich butteriness, but I'm also getting a floral note that I don't really remember getting before in Capadonic, so that's kind of cool. Oh, I'm sticking my nose right in there. It's only 48%, which for a 21-year-old is probably not that far away from cask strength, so it hasn't been reduced a huge amount, but for consistency, they took it down to 48. Better 48 than 42, let's face it. Better 48 than 40, at least when they watered it down, they didn't go overboard with it. Big vanilla, big, rich, buttery, flaky pastry thing going on here. Again, kind of an orangey thing. More the juice than the rind. Little bit of like a iron, like a rusty kind of thing on the back end. Not unpleasant, it's just a hint. Kind of adds an interesting depth of flavour to it. Very herbal. A lot of... I kind of almost get a bit of mint, a lot of thyme, maybe sage. Yeah, that's a great It's a great 21-year-old whiskey. It really is. If you're a fan of things like the Glenmorangie 18-year-old, that beautiful example of straight ex-bourbon casks with a bit of age to it, this is a good sideways move from that. And not too dissimilar price-wise, actually, as well. I think the Glenmorangie 18-year-old is getting up there these days. It's been a while since I've had it. Yeah. Great example of just sticking it in a good first fill ex-bourbon cask for a couple of decades and seeing what comes out the other end. Good quality spirit. Kind of similar to Glen Grant, to be honest. If this was cranked up to full strength, if this was a 54, 55% whiskey, it would be pretty much on par with a lot of the Glen Grants we've had from the S&WS, just the straight cask ones, not the special finishes we've had in recent months. I would say objectively better than the Glen Grant 18. Nothing against the Glen Grant 18, although it's incredibly hard to get these days because of the recognition it keeps getting. I think the Glen Grant 18's a great whiskey. I think it's a great example of its style. I don't know. I think this is better. I really do. All right, so I should probably actually, before I move on to the next whiskey, tell you about the price on this one, because that's one of the most interesting things. And of course, in an episode where we're talking about whether something is worth it for the price is kind of important. So, as I mentioned before, this one was already on at the special price because it was featured in the Dram Association just before the outbreak. So you might already know this is $252.09 right now, down from its normal price of $286.87. That's a ridiculously good price for a 21-year-old closed distillery, especially when you take into account the fact that it's fellow closed distilleries such as Port Ellen and Brora. Yes, the official releases that are coming out these days are in the 30s, like 32, 36-year-old, but they're $6,000. So it makes $252 seem like chump change, which it isn't. It's still a fairly decent amount for a whiskey, but I think pretty worth it. What makes it even more worth it is the fact that $252.09 at current exchange rate is actually cheaper than it was listed at Heathrow Airport when it was still available there. This is actually an airport exclusive, believe it or not, as well. This is one of those whiskies that we have that we shouldn't really have. I often joke that we have these because I paint a helipad on the rooftop and pretend to be an airport. No, truth be told, it's just that I know where to look, and there's apparently the LDB like to fill paperwork in wrong, and I like to sometimes take advantage of that so that the good whiskey goes to the people that deserve it, yourselves. But yeah, so this whiskey was destined for the Vancouver airport, where they now actually have some, and the funny thing is, it's this weird thing that people think that the airport stores are very good value because you don't have to pay the taxes. Well, in some parts of the world, maybe so. Here in BC, yeah, you're not paying the liquor tax, but you're still paying the LDB markups. You're still paying all of the money that still goes to the government. So it's not really tax exempt. It's just that final slab of tax which you actually get to see exempt. The LDB marks whiskies up like 110% before we even see them in the store. Like, there's so many hidden taxes for liquor here in BC, which is why the prices are relatively high on a global scale. And that's still the case here. But somehow we've managed to get this whiskey same kind of price as it was in the UK when it was available. The great thing for us as well is that the Vancouver airport, not that you can really use the Vancouver airport duty-free right now, because you shouldn't be travelling anywhere unless you're only just managing to get back to Canada because you've been stranded in, I don't know, Tahiti or Croatia or some corner of the world that was difficult to get back from. This whiskey in the Vancouver airport was $338. Now, $252 versus $338 is quite a difference. And even if you take into account the fact that you don't have to pay tax on that $338, after tax, $252 after tax is still $50 less than it is at the airport. So it's cheaper to stay at home right now. And that's what we're all about right now. We're all about the socially responsible thing to do. Stay at home, don't travel, don't bother going anywhere at the airport right now. You can get the airport exclusive Capadonic delivered to your door $50 less in the airport. For only $3, you can get this delivered right to your door. So I think that's pretty neat. So yeah, Capadonic, whiskey number 2 today. Let's see how worth it that is. Now, the final contender for today's episode is, as I mentioned, quite strong and quite peaty. And it is a personal favourite of mine and a personal favourite of quite a few people. Something that we've had just once in the Dram Association quite a while ago, and something that I believe a lot of people have forgotten exists. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Ardbeg Uigeadail. Alright, so Ardbeg Uigeadail, I think, has a bit of unfair treatment in the last few years because I think people have forgotten how good this whiskey is. And it is objectively a good whiskey. That's not just my opinion. A lot of people have rated this whiskey incredibly highly, including the man who shall not be named, who named this the best whiskey in the world back in the late 2000s, 2009, 2008, somewhere around there. But yeah, it's a very, very, very good whiskey. And the reason that it confuses and perplexes me so is that we have absolutely no trouble selling whatever limited edition, special edition Ardbegs come into our store, whether it be the rum finished one that we had recently, the Ardbeg Drum, whether it be the Kelpie that we got a couple of years ago in those strange East European casks, all of these quirky, interesting, limited edition whiskies, we sell out as much as we can get near instantly. And, there's nothing wrong with that. If you like those whiskies, that is great. But I have to say, objectively, I have never had any Ardbeg Day limited edition releases that can even hold a candle to either the Uigeadail or the Corryvreckan, two of my all-time favourite whiskies from Islay. And it's sad, because, honestly, whereas we can sell 48 bottles of the Ardbeg Drum Committee release for the same price as this whiskey, if not slightly more, in probably 20 minutes flat, we probably sell 12 of these a year. And that is a damn shame, because this whiskey is so much better than that. It's such a damn good whiskey, and if it's been a while since you've had an Ardbeg Uigeadail, you should get a bottle of Ardbeg Uigeadail. It's just as good as you remember it. I don't think the quality has wavered since it won the award. I think this is just something that Ardbeg is able to keep up production and pump out. It's obviously not that old. The key thing here is that marriage of bourbon, like full-on Ardbeg flavors with some sherry cask malts as well. And that's a style of whiskey I personally quite enjoy. It's a style of whiskey that's becoming more and more popular. It's kind of funny, a few distilleries have come out and said, oh, we're doing this thing now, we're mixing sherry and peat. It's so avant-garde, it's so brilliant. It's so been done before many, many times. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's so difficult to do it. It's so difficult to get the balance. Well, yeah, I mean, making whiskey is difficult. The good news is we have experts in the field. There's people you can hire and people you can rely on to make a quality sherried peated product. Not every distillery can and should do it, but those that do it can do it very, very well. Ardbeg isn't the only player in the game. I'm a massive fan of the Lefroy Glore. If you're a fan of Ardbeg Uigeadail, check out the Lefroy Glore. It's basically, I believe, Lefroy's answer to the Ardbeg Uigeadail. Bunnahabhain's in the game now. The Toite Chadar, very, very, very good whiskey. Doesn't have that same high proof thing that the Lore and the Uigeadail go for, but if you don't mind turning it down to 46 point something and still having that full-on peat, full-on sherry flavour, Toite Chadar is fantastic. But yeah, even Glenturret are doing heavily sherried, heavily peated whiskies these days. We even had one, that 3-year-old that we had from Morrison Mackay earlier in the season last year. We had the, what was that? It was a Ben Nevis. That was absolutely stunning. It's something that people are really now twigging that is something you can do and also release at a relatively young age. So I believe we're going to see more and more. But it's going to be hard for anyone to live up to the legacy now that Ardbeg has with the Uigeadail. Best whiskey in the world by several different competitions, and just an all-round great. And yeah, like I said, a lot of people seem to have forgotten that it exists. They're getting wrapped up in the hype for the black and the supernovas and all of these crazy whiskies, the perpetuums, and Ardbeg released so many whiskies now. And they're all good. Don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against any of them, but they're not as good as Ugadal. I've yet to have one that is. Even the 20-somethings, I don't believe were as good as the Ugadal. Just my opinion. So you're getting those beautiful sort of light but with peat notes that you get on Ardbeg. Someone's putting the recycling out. I guess this is what happens when you record something in your kitchen. That's fine. Just ignore the banging and rattling over there. So yeah, sorry. It's still got all of those beautiful Ardbeg notes. The thing I like about Ardbeg as a distillery is the fact that it somehow manages to balance all of the smoke and all of the beautiful peaty notes without any of the dirt that often comes along with it. It's not a deep, dark whiskey. It's a light floral base of a whiskey. I'd love to try Ardbeg completely unpeated just to see what those stills do with unpeated malt because it's so beautifully light. But then it's got this sort of clean white smoke and crisp bacon and all of these beautiful, really nice smoke notes to it, which I don't think any other distillery can really replicate. I haven't seen anyone else do Ardbeg's style. It's very one of a kind, much like how Lafroig can always be picked out of a crowd. 9 times out of 10, I think I can pick Ardbeg out of a crowd. I think. Maybe. Don't hold me to that. But yeah, it's a very unique individual characteristic. And that adding of the sherry casks, which gives this Ardbeg like a plum pudding, raisiny, traditional sort of sherry cask kind of notes to it, doesn't take away anything from the Ardbeg flavour. That's what's so beautiful about this whiskey, and about the Law as well, which I always compare side by side. They both have that same underlying distillery characteristic, but it's been boosted a little bit. I often, especially with the Law, I often talk about the Law as being that same screaming guitar solo of a Lafroig, but with an orchestra backing it up. And that's the same with Ardbeg. You're still getting, it's not really a screaming guitar solo so much as like a sort of an excited light. It's almost like a John Frusciante guitar solo rather than a Slash guitar solo, I think. But it's got more volume to it. It's got that orchestral. It's got the strings. It's got the flute. It's got the timpani, I guess. It's got whatever you want in the orchestra backing up that guitar solo, and it's not making the guitar solo any less there. It's just giving it more depth and emotion. That's what the sherry cask is adding to this whiskey. And I've been trying to skirt around and avoid the word complexity. Lawrence Graham once very wisely told me that complexity is the last bastion of a whiskey reviewer. Yeah, it's complex. Of course it is. It's a single malt. That's what they do. But this is objectively, I would say, more complex than the 10-year-old or the Corrie Vrecken. Now, I personally prefer the Corrie Vrecken over the Ugadal just because I love that raw, unadulterated Ardbeg flavour. I think that's what Ardbeg does best. But this is what Ardbeg does second best. This is something just beautiful and special that I've yet to have anything else quite like it. So yeah, cheers to the Ardbeg Ugadal. And this can be yours right now. It's normal price, $146.87. We only have a few bottles right now. I'm sure we can probably get more. And if this flies off the shelf at this price, we can bring more in. We'll hold this price on for a couple of weeks. We're gonna give you this right now for a super special $129.48, $129.48 for the Ardbeg Ugadal. That's a great price. It's a better price than you'll see, I practically guarantee, anywhere else right now. If you do see a better price for it, let me know, because I'd be really interested to see that. Yeah, great whiskey, and very, very much for me worth it in its price range. Very worth it. So these were the 3 whiskies today. I'm going to put them in price range order, and we'll talk about now which one I think is the most worth it at its price. Alrighty. Yep, that one was the Cappadonic. That was definitely the Tamdhu. That's so sherried. So it's hard to say, right? So for those of you who are fans of the Worth It show, which I very much recommend checking out, I'm going to put a link to it in the comments and in the in the show notes. It's not just about the food. Like, if you had the same 3 exact meals in the same exact location, if you're getting it takeout and in front of the TV, like, that's just one part of the story. Like, part of the experience is like the location, the service, the presentation, all of it. It all comes into a package. If you take away just one part of it, then you're not really looking at the whole thing. You're not doing it justice. And it's the same with the whiskies. I would say right now, if I was judging this completely on the spirit alone, the Ardbeg Ugadal wins. I think the Tamdhu, don't get me wrong, the Tamdhu is absolutely majestic. I love it for that unpeated, sherried, really approachable malt, and I think it's absolute killer for the price. But for only 20, 30 bucks more, you can get the Ardbeg Ugadal, which is just one of the all-time great whiskies. But that being said, the spirit isn't everything. What's in the bottle? Yes, it's important. Yes, it's important, but you've got to take the whole experience with it. And for me, if you take the entire experience, the winner is clear. As much as my taste buds say Ardbeg, my heart and my mind go Cappadonic. Now, the Cappadonic, it's good. It's a very, very good whiskey. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the spirit. It's just not as good for the price point. I think it's probably as good as the Ardbeg Ugadal, but quite a lot more expensive. But what you get for that price point is several things that I think make the Cappadonic and give it that edge over the Ardbeg. First of all, you get this unbelievable story about the fact that it closed down, the fact that it was a sister distillery for a long time and then came into its own and then got killed off only to be then discovered again after it's been destroyed. The fact that it's going to be gone, the fact that there's only so much of this in existence and they're not making it anymore, the fact that it's going to go up in price. It's definitely going to happen, people. It's not going to go down in price. You're going to see Cappadonic increase. Like I said, I think this is their marketing plan. I think the fact that they released this and they made such a point out of saying, I think, what's the words it says on the bottle? Once gone, there will never be another. It says it right there on the bottle. Founded 1898, closed 2002. Even has the bottle number on it. It said 4,719. All of those things to me point that Chivas Brothers are going to do the same thing that they did with Port Allen and Brora with the Cappadonic series. The first one's going to be more widely available to make people aware of it, make people know about it. And then after that, it's going to get more expensive, more rare. And people are going to start scrambling for these first ones, which is why, again, I bought one bottle of this to drink and I bought one bottle to save. I might buy another bottle to drink and another one to save, actually, because the price is so good for it. I think in 5 years' time, this is going to be a collector's item. I think it is. But I think all of that coming together, all of that experience, the fact that I've only ever had 2 other Cappadonics before this, I think it was a Gordon MacPhail and an SNWS, really draws me to this whiskey. And yeah, for me, I think right now, out of these 3, I would say Cappadonic is the most worth it at its price point. My opinion on that might change if I was to do this exact same 3 tomorrow, and so it should. Opinions should never be set in stone, especially with whiskey, because it's such a emotional, personal opinion that, yeah, I mean, opinions will always change, and you should always reevaluate your opinions on a whiskey whenever possible. And my opinion is just that, my opinion. Let me know what you would choose out of these 3 in the live chat, in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions of which one you would choose to buy if you had the option. And yeah, I mean, if you do have the option, please go ahead and buy it. On that note, I do want to thank everyone who's been so supportive of the Strath during this outbreak. I touched on this in a previous episode, but I just want to touch on it again. We are struggling, to be honest, right now. I mean, the Strathcona Hotel, we're a local-owned, family-owned business down here in Victoria, BC. The hotel is closed, the Sticky Wicket's closed, the nightclub's closed, Big Bad John's closed. Everywhere in the entire building is closed apart from the liquor store right now. And we are doing our best to try and keep the place afloat so that the 100-odd people who have all lost their job will have a job to come back to once all is said and done. You might have seen in the news recently, there have been some articles about how liquor stores are seeing record sales, some of them seeing 150% of their normal sales. That is not us. That is the liquor stores, the Walmarts of the liquor store world here in BC, the guys who have the massive stores where you can buy whole flats of Budweiser next to the supermarket. They're the guys who are getting a lot of sales now. It's not us. We are hurting. We are in trouble. Our sales are dramatically lower than they normally would be. Probably, 30 to 40% of what we normally see. And we're trying to carry the whole company on that, which is proving incredibly difficult. So thank you to everyone who's been using our online and delivery service. If you enjoy it, if you like it, please let your friends and family know. Let your neighbors know. Even if they don't like whiskey, we have hundreds of wines and other spirits and beers on there now. We're adding more every day. Our aim is in the next couple of weeks to get the entire store on there. And yeah, please do try and support us as much as you can, so that we're here and we can continue to have the Dram Association and continue to serve the whiskey community when all of this is over. As much fun as I'm having doing these videos, I would much prefer to be in front of you all physically in a room drinking whiskey with you. And hopefully we can be able to do that again in the future, but we have to keep the wheels turning on this, otherwise we're just going to fall off the rails. So yeah, thanks. And if you don't know anyone else in town here and you can't recommend the strathliquor.com website to any of your friends and family and you still want to help out, leave us a review. Go onto Google, go onto Facebook, let people know what the Strath means to you, what our community means to you. Leave them a note in the reviews so that more people can get involved and can join our community. We're always looking for new members in the Dram Association. We're not an exclusive club. We are an inclusive club. And yeah, thank you for your support. So the next video is going to come out on Sunday afternoon, and that is going to be a really Sunday evening. Time is irrelevant these days. Apparently 7 p.m. is afternoon now. Who knew? But yeah, 7 p.m. on Sunday, we will be having a Drinking Out Loud episode all about Japanese whiskey. We're actually going to be releasing a new whiskey to strathliquor.com, a cask strength Japanese whiskey. Yes, very excited to share that with you guys. I've got a cask strength Japanese whiskey coming up, as well as re-looking at some Japanese whiskeys we've had in the past in the Dram Association and putting them on special again. So please join us again, 7 o'clock on Sunday. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. I'm going to toast you with today's winner, the Cabadonic 21, /Avar. I'll see you in a couple of days. Cheers.
Here's to whiskey kisses with the peachy taste of sin.